Welcome to our deep dive into Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath.
Oh, this is going to be good.
You gave me a fascinating set of excerpts to work with for this one.
Yeah,
It seems like we're going to be exploring the unexpected advantages of being the underdog
right.
and how the things we usually think of as strengths,
Mm-hmm.
like power,
Yeah,
can sometimes backfire.
absolutely.
So kick things off.
Yeah.
Gladwell introduces this concept he calls desirable difficulties.
Yes, yes, those are so interesting.
And it's basically the idea that challenges,
Mm-hmm.
even though they might seem like setbacks at first,
Right.
they can actually force us to adapt and develop unique skills.
Exact. It's kind of counterintuitive, right?
It is.
Because you think of a difficulty as something that's going to hold you back.
Yeah.
But he's saying that certain kinds of difficulties can actually propel you forward.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into one of the stories
Oh.
Gladwell uses to illustrate this idea.
All right.
He talks about Vivek Ranadivi, this software executive,
Mm-hmm.
who takes on the seemingly impossible task of coaching his 12-year-old daughter's basketball team.
Okay.
The catch is, Vivek has zero basketball experience,
Oh, wow.
but that might actually be his greatest asset.
Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, because he's an outsider.
Yeah.
He's not bound by the traditional coaching playbook, right?
Right.
He's not stuck in those old ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So he sees an opportunity that all the seasoned coaches miss.
Yeah.
His team, they're small, but they're fast. So
Yeah.
what does he do?
I'm on the edge of my seat. What does he do?
He implements a full court press.
Wow, bold move.
It is a strategy rarely seen at that age level.
And how does that work out for them?
Well, they start winning game after game.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Much to the frustration of other
That's
coaches
that.
who accuse Vivek of being unfair.
That's so funny.
Right.
But isn't that a perfect illustration of this outsider advantage idea?
It is. It is.
By breaking the rules, you know?
Yeah.
Vivek found a way to turn his team's perceived weakness into a winning strategy.
It's about thinking outside the box, right?
It is.
And challenging those assumptions
Right.
about what it takes to succeed.
And I love how this story can apply to any of us, in any field.
Absolutely.
Think about it.
Yeah.
What are some unwritten rules or assumptions that everyone just takes for granted in your world?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a hidden opportunity there
Right.
to challenge those norms and come up with a creative solution
Absolutely.
that no one's even considered because they're so stuck in their ways.
That's a great point.
Gladwell also uses this concept of challenging assumptions when he talks about something as basic as class size.
Oh, interesting.
You know, we usually think smaller classes automatically mean better learning.
Right. Smaller is better.
That's the common belief.
Yeah.
But he presents this case study
Okay.
that kind of throws a wrench in that idea.
Uh-huh.
He compares Shepherd Valley Middle School, this small, close-knit school where everyone knows everyone,
Yeah.
to the elite Hotchkiss School,
Okay.
which is known for its tiny classes
Right.
and abundance of resources.
Uh-huh.
And what he finds
Yeah.
is that class size actually follows what's called an inverted U curve.
An inverted U curve.
Yeah, have you ever heard of that?
I haven't. Explained that to me.
Okay, so imagine drawing a U shape
Okay. Got it.
and then flipping it upside down.
Right. So like a hill.
Yeah, exactly like a hill.
Okay.
And what this curve means is that there's a sweet spot for class size.
Interesting.
Smaller can be better up to a point.
Okay.
But if you go too small,
Yeah.
it can actually hinder learning.
So there's such a thing as too small.
It seems so.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It is. It really makes you think
It does.
about that balance
Mhm.
between resources and challenge.
Right.
Could it be that too much individual attention
Yeah.
actually stifles a student's need to stretch themselves
Mm-hmm.
and learn from their peers?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a really interesting question.
It is.
And this whole idea of finding the right balance
Yeah.
reminds me of another story in the book,
Okay.
the story of Caroline Sachs,
All right.
this brilliant student who thrived in high school,
Mm-hmm.
but then faced some unexpected struggles when she went to Brown University.
Oh, wow. So she was like a big fish in a small pond.
Exactly. And that's actually what Gladwell calls it,
Oh, it is.
the big fish, little pond effect.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So imagine you're used to being at the top of your class,
Right.
surrounded by students who might not be as academically driven,
Yeah.
but then you go to a bigger, more competitive pond.
Like Brown.
Exactly, like Brown.
Okay.
And suddenly you're not the standout anymore.
Yeah, I can see how that could be tough.
It's a real blow to your confidence and your motivation.
Absolutely. You're not used to that kind of competition.
And Gladwell argues that this doesn't just apply to academics.
Right.
It can happen in any field
Yeah.
where you're suddenly surrounded by all these super talented people.
Makes you question your own abilities.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
is it always best to aim for the most elite environment?
Mm-hmm.
Or are there times when being a standout
Right.
in a less competitive setting
Yeah.
might actually be more beneficial?
That's a really good question.
It is. It is.
It's about finding the right fit for you,
It
not
is.
just chasing prestige.
It reminds me of the Impressionist painters.
Oh, yeah.
They got rejected by the prestigious salon,
Right.
but they didn't let that define them.
No, they didn't.
They created their own exhibition
Yeah.
and chose visibility and freedom over that elite stamp of approval.
And they ended up revolutionizing the art world.
They did.
So sometimes choosing the less prestigious path can be the more rewarding one.
Yeah, and maybe even lead to greater success in the long run.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about how being an outsider can be an advantage and how too much of a good thing, like super small classes
Yeah.
or being surrounded by brilliant minds,
Uh-huh.
can actually backfire.
Interesting.
But how does all of this tie into the idea of desirable difficulties
That's a great question.
that you mentioned earlier?
It does, and it leads us to another fascinating story.
Okay, lay it on me.
The story of David Boies.
David Boies, yeah.
For those who might not know,
Right.
he's this legal titan.
Yeah.
He's one of the most renowned lawyers in America.
Talk of his game.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
Boies is dyslexic.
Oh, wow.
And you'd think that would be a huge disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially in law,
Especially in law.
where you're reading and analyzing all those complex documents.
Exactly.
But that's where desirable difficulties come in.
So instead of holding him back,
Yeah,
it actually pushed him
it did.
to develop some incredible strengths.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is.
How our brains can adapt.
So tell me,
Yeah.
how did his dyslexia actually help him become a better lawyer? Well, because reading was so challenging for him, he
Right.
became an exceptional listener.
Okay.
So while other law students were busy taking notes,
Yeah.
Boies was completely focused on every single word,
Wow.
absorbing all the nuances, the details.
That's amazing.
It's like he was training his brain
Yeah.
to process information differently.
Right. He had to find a different way.
Exactly.
And that, in turn, strengthened his memory.
Absolutely. His memory became legendary.
He could recall tiny details,
Anything.
inconsistencies, things other people completely miss.
Because he'd trained himself to listen so intently.
So his dyslexia,
Yeah.
which so many would see as a setback,
Mm-hmm.
became his secret weapon.
His superpower.
It's incredible.
It really shows you the power of our brains
It does.
to adapt and overcome.
And it makes you think
Uh-huh.
what hidden strengths we might all have
Right.
lurking within our own challenges.
Exactly. We all have
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
We just gotta find them.
This whole thing reminds me of this other story Gladwell tells
Okay, which one?
about Emil J. Freireich,
Oh, Freireich, yeah.
a pioneering cancer researcher.
An amazing, complicated figure.
I've read a bit about him.
Yeah.
He was known for being relentless, pushing boundaries,
He didn't play by the rules.
challenging the medical establishment.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to shake things up.
I think some even called him volatile.
Oh, yeah. He had a reputation.
But he was driven
Absolutely.
by this unwavering belief that a cure was possible,
Mm-hmm.
even when the odds seemed totally against him.
He never gave up.
And this brings us to another type of desirable difficulty
Oh, interesting.
that Gladwell explores.
Okay.
He calls them remote misses.
Remote misses. I haven't heard that one.
So these are experiences that,
Yeah.
while they seem negative on the surface,
Right.
they can actually cultivate
Mhm.
tremendous courage
Okay.
and this willingness to challenge conventions.
So it's not just about overcoming obstacles. It's about how those obstacles shape your whole mindset.
Exactly.
Like they give you a different perspective.
Yeah.
A willingness to push boundaries.
It's almost like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's a good way to put it.
But in Freireich's case, it's more than just strength.
Right.
It fueled his creativity, his determination.
He used his experiences to fuel his passion.
I love that.
And speaking of challenging authority,
Yeah.
being what Gladwell calls disagreeable.
Uh-huh.
That's another key theme.
It is.
And it reminds me of Wyatt Walker.
Wyatt Walker.
Yeah, one of the key strategists.
Right, in Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
He was a brilliant guy.
From what I know,
Yeah,
Walker really understood power dynamics.
he did. He knew how to play the game.
He knew that sometimes
Yeah.
achieving real change requires being disruptive, provoking a reaction.
And that's exactly what he did in Birmingham.
So tell me about that.
Well, he knew that to expose the brutality of segregation, they needed to force Bull Connor.
Whoa, Bull Connor, Birmingham's police commissioner.
Yeah, a notoriously racist guy.
Right, to overreact.
They had to provoke a response.
It sounds like a risky strategy.
It was, but Walker understood something crucial.
What's that?
He knew that Connor's weakness was his own bigotry,
Okay.
so they organized those children's marches,
Yeah.
knowing full well that Connor would likely respond with violence.
And he did.
He did.
Those images
Horrible, but powerful.
of peaceful protesters being attacked.
It shocked the nation.
It was a turning point.
It was.
It was a risky strategy.
But it worked.
It did. It forced people to confront the reality of segregation.
And it highlights the power of disagreeableness.
Yeah.
This willingness to challenge authority,
To disrupt the status quo.
even if it makes people uncomfortable.
Sometimes that's the only way to make real change.
It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
what are the systems, the structures,
In our own lives.
yeah, that we need to disrupt?
That's a good question to ask yourself. So we've seen how disadvantages can become advantages, how desirable difficulties can shape us,
Right?
and how being disagreeable can actually be a force for good.
Absolutely.
But Gladwell also explores the limits of power.
Yes, he does.
Right.
When it's wielded without empathy.
Yeah. Or a real understanding of the situation.
And that brings us to Rosemary Lawler and her experience during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The Troubles, yeah, a really difficult time.
Rosemary Lawler's story takes us right into the heart of it.
Right to Belfast.
During this really turbulent period in Northern Ireland's history.
It was,
What I know about the Troubles
yeah.
is that it was this intense conflict between Catholics and Protestants.
Right.
And the British Army was brought in to try and keep the peace,
To maintain order.
but it didn't really go according to plan.
No, it didn't.
What happened?
Well, they came in with this idea
Okay.
that overwhelming force would solve the problem.
Right. To show a strong hand?
Exactly. Deter violence, restore order.
Seems logical enough.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But they completely missed the underlying complexities of the conflict.
Okay.
They overlooked the historical grievances, the mistrust between communities,
Right.
the sense of injustice that was fueling the violence.
So their show of force actually made things worse.
It did. It backfired.
How so?
It alienated the Catholic community.
Okay.
And instead of reducing the violence,
Yeah.
it actually escalated it.
It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Exactly.
Sometimes a gentler approach is needed.
You need to understand the situation.
Right. Not just react with force.
And this idea that brute force isn't always the answer
Yeah.
reminds me of another story.
Oh, which one?
Mike Reynolds.
Oh, right. The three strikes law.
Remember him?
The grieving father who pushed for harsher sentencing.
Yeah, after his daughter was murdered.
It seemed like a straightforward solution at the time.
Right. Longer sentences, less crime.
It made sense to a lot of people.
A lot of people were angry.
Yeah. They wanted something to be done.
And that
The
law,
three strikes law.
it became really popular.
It did.
But as Gladwell points out, it had some really bad unintended consequences.
Right.
Mass incarceration.
Okay.
It disproportionately impacted minority communities.
Right. Right.
And instead of making communities safer,
Yeah.
it often had the opposite effect.
Really?
Yeah, it created this environment where
Yeah.
people saw law enforcement as the enemy,
Wow.
which just fueled the cycle of crime.
So they were focused on punishment,
Mm,
on being tough on crime.
exactly.
But they didn't address the underlying issues.
The social and economic factors.
Poverty, lack of opportunity.
Exactly.
And that's one of the big takeaways here, right?
It is. It is.
Power without empathy, without understanding.
Can be destructive.
Yeah.
Whether it's the military,
Right.
the legal system.
Or even just in our personal lives.
It's about using power responsibly.
So if brute force isn't always the answer,
Yeah.
what is?
Well, Gladwell offers this really powerful counterpoint.
Okay, I'm listening.
The story of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon.
Champon, this little village in France.
Yeah, that sheltered Jewish refugees during World War II.
It's such a moving story
It is.
of courage and compassion.
Right in the face of unimaginable evil.
And what's so amazing
Yeah.
is that their resistance to the Nazis, it wasn't just random acts of kindness.
No.
It was deeply rooted.
In their history,
Oh.
their values.
They were descendants of Huguenots
Exactly. French Protestants.
who had been persecuted themselves.
For centuries.
So they knew what it was like.
To be the underdog.
to be targeted.
And that shaped their whole response.
To the Nazi occupation.
They understood what it meant to stand up for what's right.
Even when it was dangerous.
Even when it put their own lives at risk.
And they had this leader, Pastor André Trocmé.
A truly remarkable man.
He embodied this spirit of defiance.
He did. He absolutely refused to comply with the Nazis.
He said, "We will not obey. We will protect these people."
Powerful words.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
The Nazis never really cracked down on them.
Like they did in other places?
It's like their moral courage just baffled them.
I think it did. They didn't know how to handle it.
It's a testament to the power of conviction.
It really is.
Of collective action.
Rooted in shared values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive
Yeah.
into David and Goliath,
What a book.
what are some key things you want our listeners to take away from this?
Well, first, remember that our assumptions about power and advantage are often wrong.
Okay.
What seems like a disadvantage can actually be a source of strength.
Like with David Boies and his dyslexia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True strength often lies in the courage to challenge conventions.
To question assumptions.
To fight for what we believe in.
Even when the odds are against us.
Even then.
And finer without empathy.
Uh-huh.
Without understanding.
Can be incredibly destructive.
No matter how good our intentions might be.
It's about wielding power responsibly.
Powerful words to end on.
I hope so.
Thank you for this fascinating exploration of David and Goliath.
It's been a pleasure.
I know our listeners will be thinking about these stories for a long time to come.
I hope they do.
And maybe they'll even find their own David and Goliath moments unfolding in their own lives.
Maybe right around the corner.
Until next time.